In the year 64 AD, the Roman Emperor Nero made one tiny decision about the metal content of a coin. It seemed harmless. Nobody in Rome even noticed it happening. 200 years later, that one decision had turned into an economic collapse so severe that soldiers refused to accept their own government's money. Bread cost more than most people earned in a week, and the most powerful empire on earth was quietly falling apart, not from invasion, not from plague, but from its own currency. Here's exactly how that happened, and here's the part almost nobody tells you. The warning signs were visible for over a century before anyone tried to fix it. Let's make this real. You're a Roman soldier stationed on the German frontier in the year 260 AD. You've served for 15 years. Every payday, you're handed the same silver coin your father was paid with when he served the Denarius. Except it isn't the same coin, not even close. Your father's Denarius was almost pure silver. Yours is mostly copper with a thin silver wash that rubs off if you hold it too long in your palm. You know this. Everyone knows this. The merchant at the market knows it too, which is why he now charges you 3 times what your father paid for the exact same loaf of bread. It isn't just bread. Your commanding officer has started paying part of your wages in grain and salted meat instead of coin, because the army itself no longer fully trusts the money it's handing out. Veterans who saved coins for 20 years to retire on now find those savings by roughly a third of what they used to. Some soldiers have started weighing their pay on small scales before accepting it, checking whether this batch of coins is even worse than the last one. A currency that was supposed to be a stable store of value has become something you have to inspect, like spoiled food. You didn't cause this. You didn't vote for it. Rome didn't have elections for this kind of thing. A series of emperors, one after another, quietly shaved a little more silver out of every coin they minted, to pay for wars, for palaces, for donations to keep the army loyal. Each individual decision seemed small. Stacked on top of each other for 200 years, they destroyed the value of money itself. By the middle of the 3rd century, the Roman monetary system had entered what historians now call the crisis of the 3rd century inflation, so severe that some price records show costs rising by 10 times or more within a single generation. Farmers stopped selling grain for coins that might be worthless by the time they could spend them. Soldiers were increasingly paid in kind food, land, goods, because money itself could no longer be trusted. An empire that had run on coinage for 400 years was quietly reverting to a barter economy, one transaction at a time. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Contemporary Roman writers barely mention it. There was no single dramatic headline moment. No crash, no bank run, no single day anyone could point to and say this is when it happened. It was death by 1,000 cuts, spread across generations, and by the time it was undeniable, an entire way of economic life had already quietly disappeared. So, how did this actually work, mechanically? And more importantly, what's the specific warning sign buried in this story that you can actually recognize? The mechanism is called debasement, and it's beautifully, dangerously simple. A government controls the mint. If the government needs more money than it collects in taxes, for a war, for a bribe to the army, for anything, it has 2 honest options: raise taxes or borrow money. Both are politically painful and slow. There is a third option, and it's the one nearly every debasing government eventually reaches for: quietly reduce the amount of precious metal in each coin while keeping the coin's face value exactly the same. Melt down old coins, mix in cheaper metal, mint more coins from the same amount of silver. On paper, the treasury suddenly has more money to spend. In reality, every coin already in circulation is now worth a little less, and nobody voted on it, agreed to it, or was even told it was happening. Nero started it modestly in 64 AD, reducing the denarius from roughly 98% silver to around 93%. It seemed minor. But once a government solves a budget problem this way once, the temptation to do it again, this time a little more, because it worked so smoothly last time, becomes almost impossible to resist. Emperor after emperor followed the same pattern. By the reign of Emperor Gallienus in the 260s, the denarius contained as little as 5% actual silver. The rest was base metal dressed up to look the part, sometimes with just enough silver wash on the surface to fool someone at a quick glance in the market. This is the actionable lesson buried inside this 200-year collapse. Debasement is never announced. It never shows up as a single dramatic event you can point to and prepare for. It shows up as a slow, almost invisible erosion, a currency that looks the same, is called the same thing, and is legally worth the same amount, while quietly buying less and less every year. The specific, practical skill this history teaches is recognizing that pattern early. When a government or institution starts adjusting the underlying value of something, while insisting the number on the label hasn't changed, that's precisely the moment to start paying close attention. Rome eventually tried to fix it. Emperor Diocletian issued a famous price-fixing edict in 301 AD, attempting to legally cap the cost of goods across the empire. It failed almost immediately. Merchants simply refused to sell at a loss, and black markets exploded instead. The real fix didn't come until Constantine introduced an entirely new gold coin, the Solidus, deliberately kept at a fixed, honest gold content and protected from the debasement cycle that had destroyed the Denarius. That coin remained remarkably stable for centuries afterward, proof that the solution was never complicated. It was simply the discipline to stop doing the thing that caused the problem in the first place. First, debasement is not a modern invention. The exact mechanism, quietly reducing the real value of money while keeping its face value the same, is one of the oldest tricks in economic history, practiced by nearly every ancient civilization that minted its own coins, from Rome to the Byzantine Empire to medieval European kingdoms. Second, the collapse was never a single moment. It took roughly 200 years from Nero's first small reduction to the currency being functionally worthless. Slow-moving problems are almost always harder to notice, and harder to stop, than fast ones, precisely because there's never one obvious moment that demands action. Third, the fix, when it finally came, wasn't clever. It was simply a currency that governments and rulers were disciplined enough not to tamper with. Constantine's Solidus worked not because it was innovative, but because it was protected from the exact temptation that destroyed everything before it. If this is the kind of history you actually want more of, real mechanisms, real consequences, not just dates and battles, subscribe, because this channel is building an entire series unpacking the financial collapses history tends to skip over. And speaking of collapses nobody saw coming, in the next video, we're going back to 1630s Holland, where a single flower bulb briefly became more valuable than a house, and an entire country lost its mind over tulips. It's one of the strangest financial bubbles in recorded history, and it happened over a plant.